All right. Hey guys, my name is Brian. Welcome to the channel. I am currently a Grandmaster 2 support player. I primarily play Loki, maybe even some would say borderline one trick him. But at this point in time, I feel like enough weeks have gone by where people kind of have a solid feel for the current state of the game for most heroes. So I kind of just wanted to make a tier list for the game before the mid-season rolls around in a few weeks, and kind of give my thoughts on it. Anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the actual tier list. For the purposes of my tier list, this is how I'm going to make it work, okay? Long story short, I would say that majority of characters in this game are good, are like really good. Very playable, very viable, I should say, for ranked. There's maybe only like a small handful of heroes from like, I'm not really a big fan of seeing either on my team or, yeah, just on my team. And they're usually, more often than not, from what I've seen, they kind of just end up getting steamrolled whenever I play against them. So, and then this might be a little different from most tier lists you might see as well, but I also have a bottom tier right here called Unsure. I'm unsure about the picks that end up here simply because I just never see them in my games to really have enough data to form an opinion about them. So I'm just not sure. Okay, that's just the best way to put it. Either that, or maybe it might be heroes that I feel like people are not playing correctly, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like there's enough potential to the hero that the people are just not utilizing properly. And so he just feels weak, but I feel like he has potential to not be weak, if that makes sense. So some sort of combination of those two will end up in the unsure category. S tier is pretty much anything in the S tier is essentially what I would call bannable. These are heroes you might pretty much see end up getting banned on a regular basis. Either they end up getting banned or they should get banned, one of the two. The A tier is what I would call the solid tier. You can't go wrong with these characters. Essentially, whatever doesn't get banned in, or whatever does get banned in the S tier, you just pick the substitute in the A tier. These are strong heroes all around, but there's nothing about them that pushes them over the edge to make them broken, if that makes sense. Anything in the B tier, I would call is kind of mediocre. You don't really want to be playing these characters, at least at the higher ranks. You don't really want to be playing these characters. I would say up until Diamond, you can get away with playing them, but like Diamond and onwards, unless you have like a specific reason why you're playing those characters, it's usually not the greatest idea to play them, at least in my personal opinion. I feel like you have to put in a lot of effort to get minimal results, if that makes sense. And I don't know, just anyways. And C tier, I'd probably say C tier is the only like sort of bad tier. Again, I don't really think any hero in this game is bad, but obviously there's gonna be a hierarchy. This is probably gonna be the only tier where I would say it's needs buffs. It's probably the best way to put it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm not going to have the heroes in any particular order within the tiers. I'm just going to put them in the tier that I think they're in. Otherwise, I will end up frying my brain trying to sort them out. So I'm going to go in order from tanks to DPS to supports. So without further ado, we're going to start off with Hulk. Hulk, I think, is absolutely still S tier, even though his shield got the 50 HP health nerf. So it's a lot easier to actually break Hulk shields now. He's still an insanely good hero, like even without any team ups at all whatsoever, which is what like people would typically play Hulk for. Just on his own, he's so goddamn annoying. He's so aggressive. The dude, even without any healing from his teammates, the moment that he gets his ult, the dude is just unkillable. He's so darn aggressive and he does so much damage. He's so disruptive. He just jumps into the backline and just like delays him for like a whole minute by himself. It's actually insane how much value Hulk gets without any team ups. Okay, I guess that's also something worth noting, that this tier list is primarily going to be rating them based on without team ups, and even I'll mention team ups here and there just to kind of give an idea of like where they would be with team ups. But for the most part, even with team ups, most of these heroes won't really change positions that much, or at all. There's only maybe like a small handful of heroes that might end up changing a tier if they have the team up, if that makes sense. But yeah, Hulk is just insane, man. Ridiculous. He's still an absolutely solid hero. I feel bad for any Hulk mains because they like never get to actually play their main. Captain America, I'm actually gonna put Captain America in the unsure category because I don't really see him that often anymore for this season. I usually see him a little bit last season. That was probably because people were trying out different characters and stuff. But he's, yeah, I don't know. I just feel unsure about him. Like the rare few times that I actually did see him, it's like it doesn't really feel like he's doing much. But like at the same time, when I did see him, I also felt like they just weren't as good of a player as they could have been if this was like a Captain American main or one trick, you know what I mean? So so because of that, I'm putting him in the unsure category. He kind of feels like a worse Black Panther in a way, where he's there to be annoying, but like because his damage is kind of weak, I kind of just ignore him half the time. But like he never dies either, so it's very strange. Yeah, I put him, and like I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like his ult's kind of lacking. Like it's kind of like a worse Brig ult for any of you Overwatch refugees out there like myself. It's kind of like a worse Brig out because it does provide healing to teammates as well as I think movement speed. But the thing is that like the path of the ult on the ground is small enough that I feel like it's a bit difficult for your teammates to actually utilize it, if that makes sense. So I don't know. Yeah, just overall, I just don't know what to think about Captain America. I just don't have enough evidence on this guy. Yeah. Anyways, next up we have Groot. I'm putting Groot in the solid category. Groot is easily probably one of the best tanks for sure. He's in this category primarily because A, he has really good damage. B, his walls are just mad fucking annoying. If you're a good group player, they're just mad fucking annoying. There's not a whole lot of characters that can like burst down his walls, especially from the support roster. There's probably the only two support heroes that have the best chance of actually mowing down Groot's walls quickly are Loki and Adam Warlock, because everyone else just does not do enough damage. Because I think each of the small walls have like 400 HP if I remember that correctly. So like you can like hold down the charge with the right click on Adam Warlock to try and help burst him down quickly, or with Loki, if you have two clones up, you can do 90 damage to the wall per shot. So after a few shots, you can destroy a wall. That's kind of your best option for supports. It's really just those two characters. And then the DPS category is a bit all over the place with how much burst damage they have. And then tanks just kind of struggle overall against. They're better off just ignoring walls majority of the time. Groot can be an absolute monster, especially, and also to his ultimate is a solid like combo maker. It can combo with a lot of DPS ults where you get the enemy team all together, then you have some like big burst damage ultimate on the DPS, just ult on top of the Groot pull. So solid character. Nothing about him is inherently broken, because like even though he's like mad annoying, he has good stats. It's all dealable. Like there's ways to deal with him. Still a pain in the ass, but there's ways to deal with him, and that's kind of why he's in the A tier. Next up, Venom. I'm putting Venom in the B category. Like, I'm sorry. I feel like the dude just needs a buff. Like every time I play against a Venom player, I feel like he just doesn't do anything. I would honestly say that like the only way that Venom becomes viable is when he's with Spiderman. For the team up. It's literally just for the team up that you basically play Venom. That's basically it at this point. because the dive can actually be pretty scary. If like both Venom and Spider-Man together dive somebody, that is actually scary. But just alone as a tank, he's kind of like, he kind of has like the Captain America aspect a little bit, where like the dude doesn't die, but it also feels like he doesn't do much. So yeah, I think he just does a little bit better, or I should say he has a more understandable gameplay loop than Captain America. Whereas Captain America, I'm just not really sure like what to think about him, whereas Venom is a little bit easier to understand what he's trying to accomplish, how you're supposed to play him, blah blah blah. So I'm putting Venom in the B category. I felt like he might need a small buff to his damage or something, because he does feel a little lacking, either to his damage or maybe even like how quickly the burst damage occurs from the little grasp ability that he has. Just something to like help him secure kills just a little bit easier, because I feel like he's just not quite there. He's like almost there. He's like right on the border, but not quite. Anyways, Thor. I think Thor is in the A tier. Thor is actually kind of similar to Groot, where like Thor is just like, it just feels like Thor never dies, man. The dude is just tanky as fuck. But he also does insane damage, and it's even worse when he's in his Thor force, whatever that thing is called, where he's like chucking lightning bolts at you. That thing is ridiculous. He just like zones an entire area by himself. Like legitimately, it's scary fighting against a good Thor player, because he just like beelines for you with no fear. He kind of just like ignores the lobby, and he just like beelines for the backline the entire game, and no one can punish him enough because he's just so tanky. The dude's an actual menace in the right hands. And he has some like decent team ups too. I think the only reason I don't have him in the S tier is because there are just tanks that are just better. Like, how should I say it? There are tanks that can help you win team fights, whereas Thor is good in the 1v1s, if that makes sense. In actual team fights, I'm not too sure. I don't see enough Thors to really form an opinion about that, but I know for a fact the dude can be a menace in the right hands, so I'm putting him in the A tier. Doctor Strange, I think even with the nerfs to his E, he's still an S tier pick. The dude, I'm actually surprised more people don't ban Strange, but I think that's partially because so many people play Strange, they don't want to ban Strange, if that makes sense. His Eye of Agamotto is probably, in my personal opinion, the most annoying tank ultimate in the game, alongside probably Magneto, but that's for a separate reason. Doctor Strange, his ult alone can help you just win team fights easily, and obviously there's so many different like portal techs out there on different maps and such. Dude's a monster, and like even when I'm playing against him now in like my Grandmaster ranks, I'm seeing Stranges do the most bizarre movement I've seen. Like I didn't even know you could, like, when you fly, I guess there's some sort of like animation cancel you can do, where you can get the movement, the acceleration from the fly ability to quickly jump in the air, and I don't know how, but they somehow like animation cancel it, and then while they're mid hop, they do their Eye of Agamotto, so by the time they actually land, it hits the enemies, and it's just, so he'll literally just like leapfrog over your own front line. He'll just leapfrog over the enemy tanks, just ult just hit the entire team, the backline and the front line at the same time, and then he just murders the backline by himself, and then your team just kind of like finishes off the rest of the team. It's just like there's stuff like that coming out all this time for this character. The dude is crazy. He's just ridiculous. Like now half the time, if I know Strange is nearby, I'm like trying to keep my distance, because I'm like, I don't know what type of magic sorcery this guy's about to pull out his magic hat. The guy is insane, in like really good players' hands. Busted character, really good. Like it has a high skill cap, but god damn. Oh, it can be rough playing against a good Strange player, if that makes sense. Anyways, Magneto, I think Magneto is an A tier. I think it's primarily because of the fact there's Cloak and Dagger. is pretty much like one of the best supports in the game right now. Even in my personal opinion, I think Cloak Dagger was still one of the best supports in the game from last season. I think majority of the player base just didn't realize how good she was. Even without like the buffs that came from Season 1 for her, I still think she was easily one of the best. Anyways, Magneto, I see a lot more Magneto lately, and I think it's probably because of Cloak and Dagger, because Magneto's ult kind of counters Cloak and Dagger's ult. Where, in case you didn't know, whenever Cloak and Dagger ults, you know how she like pauses between each dash? Magneto basically, like, as soon as he hears Cloak and Dagger ult, he pops his ult, and then he just waits for Cloak and Dagger to pause for one of her pauses, and he just chucks it at her, and it kills her every single time. It's just like an auto delete button. Because of that interaction right there, it kind of helps keep Cloak and Dagger players in check. So I've been seeing a lot of Magneto lately. Plus, at the same time too, even if like you can't kill their Cloak and Dagger, you can still protect your own Cloak and Dagger with Magneto. So like whenever Cloak and Dagger is ulting, an enemy Magneto or somebody else pops their ultimate at your Cloak and Dagger, you can just bubble your Cloak and Dagger to save her. So it's just overall solid pick. So I'd say he's mostly solid right now because of the current meta. I would say he's still solid even without the current meta too, but I think it's more so because of the current meta, if that makes sense. Peni Parker, I actually think this might be controversial, but I do think Peni Parker is an AT hero. The problem is that most players just don't know how to play her or don't bother to try to learn her well, and essentially just suck at her. They just suck at the character, so they think she's bad, if that makes sense. Whereas like I've played with and against some really good Peni Parker players, and I can tell you it feels like it almost feels like playing a really good Symmetra player in Overwatch, where like you don't see them very often, but when you do, it's like it's spooky because you're kind of like, I don't know what to do against this guy. It's so like the playstyle is so different and strange from what you think it would be. She kind of acts as, the best way to put it is that she kind of just ends up as like a flanker. She just like flanks the whole time, and she's trying to bait the enemy into like chasing her, so she can just melt them inside her own little car wash, her spider nests and stuff. Kind of like how Symmetra does in Overwatch. Like that's the best way I like to think about it. Her playstyle is kind of like Symmetra. You're trying to bait people into your area, into your traps, and if they don't come to your area, you're just like harassing them for free from like some weird off angle. I really do think she's a lot better than people give her credit for, and I think she even has one of the highest win rates in the game among tanks, but I would take that with a grain of salt, because I wouldn't be surprised if that's just an outlier, because there's maybe not as many Peni players at higher ranks. The data is skewed, if that makes sense. So I do think she's a solid hero though. Yeah, anyways, next up we have the DPS characters. I'm putting Black Panther in the B tier. He's called the Tickle Monster for a reason. The dude, I feel like his entire gameplay loop pretty much revolves around flanking to the back line and then unloading all of your cooldowns into the back line. The problem is that I feel like the player base, at least at the higher ranks, has gotten good enough at understanding his like combo loops that they can react to it a lot better. They can survive against it. So like all you gotta do is either like get out of the way quickly, or just pocket each other during the cooldown combo, and then the dude just kind of ends up being a sitting duck, because now he has no cooldowns, or even if he stops mid combo, he doesn't have all of his cooldowns for the full combo anymore, so he can't actually like fully burst you down anymore. So it's just, I don't know, he's kind of lackluster. At least at the higher ranks, he's kind of lackluster. Doesn't usually get much done. Doesn't quite have the mobility that some of the other flanker type heroes have either. So it's just, yeah, it's just lackluster. Like pretty much anybody in the B tier category, you don't really want on your team unless it's just for a very specific reason. Like, for example, the only time I would maybe even bother to expect, I think a Black Panther would be actually make sense on a team is if you're playing like a full dive comp of some sort. You know, does that make sense? If you're playing like full dive and like obviously some of the other dive characters got picked, then you run the Black Panther. Like that's what I'm thinking. But for the most part, if you're not playing a dive comp, like I wouldn't pick Black Panther. He just I don't know. I feel like he just doesn't do much, at least at the higher ranks. Next up, we have Black Widow. I'm putting Black Widow in the unsure category. Simply put, I've literally only seen this character played once in all of my ranked games, at least on my main account. Only once, and that was against Kepri, the Overwatch streamer Kepri. Because obviously he's a Widowmaker main from Overwatch, so it was like obvious he's gonna play Widow, Black Widow. But that game was garbage. We ended up having a thrower, and he left like mid match, so like I couldn't even really tell what. Yeah, I couldn't really even tell like how the match was going because it was just kind of a throw from the get go. Yeah, I've heard reports that she's actually pretty good at the higher ranks, and I can see it, to be honest. There are like a decent amount of maps in the game where you have decent sidelines, and even though she can't one-shot kill, the fact that like there's so much tickle damage in the game that's all she needs. She just needs a little tick damage on anybody on the enemy team, and she could basically one-shot them. Or if you give her even just a small amount of damage boost from like any source, so either Rocket's ultimate, God forbid you have one, or a Storm. Storm is like most of the time in her damage boost, or a Mantis damage boost. There's a few damage boost sources in the game. Or maybe even like the Cloak and Dagger Discord debuff. The black wall, for any of you who don't know what I'm talking about. Just any form of extra damage is enough to give Black Widow the one shot. And more often than not, at least at the higher ranks, people are always taking chip damage here and there. So it's not uncommon for her to just one shot people, especially since at higher ranks, people, at least the DPS players, tend to have better aim. So yeah, in the right hands, I see potential for her to be solid. I just never see her, so I can't really tell you myself. On that note, I'm also putting Hawkeye in the unsure. I don't think I've ever seen a single game against a Hawkeye. I just never see him, so I couldn't really tell you. Unfortunate. Hela, I'm still putting Hela in the A tier. I think the main thing for me is the fact that people have just gotten a lot better at being able to react to and deal with her ultimate. People were like absolutely infuriated and like upset about how OP her ult was, but like now I feel like the player base has kind of like adjusted to it, that like every time I hear a Hela ult, I'm not worried. I usually don't get worried because like the startup animation is slow enough for her to get set up for me to, at least like as a support player, for example, to just like hide behind a wall or get around a corner or something, that it kind of just becomes useless. Or that either that or like you have a Doctor Strange in your team and he just puts up the fucking force field in front of her face for the entire ult duration. So it's just kind of like it just completely nullifies it. Or either that or like you have enough support healing on your team, or you can kind of out heal the damage that your team is receiving from the Hela ult. Like there's enough counters in the game that her ultimate just doesn't feel as good as it used to, because people just adjusted to it now. I will say though, outside of her ultimate, she's still a very solid pick. Like I'm surprised I don't see more Hela players in my lobbies, because like she still does like a shit ton amount of damage. She's not. She only got a 5% damage nerf, which is really not a lot. It really isn't. So she's practically the same as she was last season. So I'm actually surprised more people don't play her. It kind of, I'm a little weirded out by that fact. Anyways, next up we have Iron Fist. I actually think Iron Fist is A tier. When I see people go dive and Spider-Man gets banned, okay, which has happened quite often, I end up seeing those Spider-Man players go Iron Fist, and I can tell you right now, without a doubt, I would rather fight Spider-Man than I would fight Iron Fist, because Iron Fist is just so god annoying as like. Let me put it like this: the dude is tanky as fuck. The dude just applies so much pressure, and it just feels like he doesn't die because he gets shields. So I can't kill the fucker. It's just so annoying. So annoying. I would legitimately rather fight Spider-Man than fight Iron Fist. He's a very solid character. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I'm glad more people don't play him because I'd be losing my mind. Next up, we have Iron Man. Without the team up, he's in the B tier in my opinion. Because he doesn't do enough damage without the team up to be scary enough for us to like completely respect him, if that makes sense. You respect him you respect him enough to like reposition to deal with his angles, his off angles in the sky. But aside from that, just because you don't want, obviously you don't want to take free damage from him. But aside from that, you don't really worry about it too much, especially when you have characters on your team that can help shoot him and just like shoot him down in the sky. So yeah. And his ultimate, even though it's a one shot, there's actually a decent amount of like things in the game that stop the ultimate, at least ones that get played, like Loki's runes just negate the ultimate. Obviously Doctor Strange can just like put up the shield and just block the ultimate. There's enough stuff in the game that like consistently get played, at least at the higher ranks, that just like deny his ultimate, that you don't really see a lot of value get from it. Although I will say, it in the same way that Magneto will ult to counter ult Cloak and Dagger, you can kind of do the same with Iron Man's. I will say though that if you do have the Hulk team up, then Iron Man is probably one of the few characters that can actually change a tier. I'll put him in the A tier in that situation if you have the team up. But without the team up, he's kind of in the B tier in my opinion. He has okay pressure, but it's not strong enough pressure to really make the biggest difference in my opinion. Next up we have Magik. Magik's in the A tier. I don't know how to put it. I feel like Magik is so hard to kill sometimes. She's just constantly getting shields, so she just feels impossible to kill sometimes, especially since she's like warping through the fight with her little teleport portal thingy. So she's literally invincible during those. She has those iframes. And she's a solid hero. And then she's like either, there's only like two playstyles I see with a Magik player. They either are constantly playing with the team for like the big team fights. She's getting all the like big cleave damage with her sword, or B, she's flanking into the enemy's backline in like half the time. And now you have to fight this like tanky ass girl that's also somewhat evasive. It's just so annoying. Solid character, very solid character. She's not like, I don't know how to word it. She's kind of weird. She's obviously really good in both play styles, but at the same time, it doesn't come across like she's doing a whole lot until you start seeing people die. Because then once you start seeing teammates die, then you're like, oh shit, this match is a problem. But like by that point, it's already too late. So she's kind of slippery like that. It's kind of weird. But overall, very solid hero. Moon Knight. I'm also putting Moonlight in the A tier, and this is, I would say, solely for two reasons. Okay, in case you didn't know, Moon Knight's ultimate's currently bugged. It does about double the damage it's supposed to. That's why it feels like Moon Knight's just like instantly killing you or your team before you can even finish his voice line. it's because it's bugged. His ultimate is bugged. Yeah. So I'm putting him in A tier primarily because his ultimate is just fucking stupid. It's just dumb. Like it's so fast and how quickly it kills people that most people can't react to it. And even when they do react to it, like if I'm playing support, I still can't guarantee that I'm gonna get out or I can get my teammates out because of how quick it is. It's ridiculous. It's probably I hate it the most. It's probably my most hated ultimate in the game right now. It's just because like it just comes out of nowhere and you can't really react to it. So yeah, I hate it for that reason. His onks are annoying. Even at high tiers, Moon Knight players are a lot better at getting value out of their onks. So sometimes it'll just be like out of nowhere. I'll just take like 90% of my health out of nowhere. I'll be full HP just out of nowhere, or I'll just magically die out of nowhere too. I thought I was fine. I'll just magically die, because like some random Moon Knight just like hit me or not even hit me, it just like, it just ricocheted between all my teammates and finally reached me in the backline. I'm just like, what the fuck was that? Yeah, he can be pretty good. So like just for example, like on the very narrow choke points, which will typically be like payload type maps, think like Midtown for example, where there's like very narrow pathways that the payload has to go through. Things like that are like Moon Knight's wet dream, because everyone kind of has to play along those narrow choke points. So Moon Knight can just like spam down a choke more or less and just get free damage off people. It's really dumb. It's very dumb. Next up we have Namor. I'm putting Namor in the A tier. Namor is just consistently a really good anti-dive DPS. He essentially helps protect the backline without actually having to like protect the backline, if that makes sense. Just his presence alone is enough to ward off DPS players, or dive players I should say, and get them to swap. On top of that too, he also has some really good ult combos, like with Groot for example, where you can Groot use the pull on Groot's ultimate, use Groot's ultimate and then Namor's wail on top of Groot's ultimate to kind of like one shot a team. It's pretty good. And his ultimate's so wide too that like you can just displace an enemy team with it. It's just, and he has really good damage as well. Like overall, he's just a solid character, very solid character. It's not uncommon to see, at least if you're in a group, it's not uncommon for him to be banned, just because dive teams don't want to have to deal with the Namor, so they'll ban the Namor. That's not uncommon. Next up we have Psylocke. Weirdly enough, like maybe last season I would have put Psylocke in the S tier, but this season I'm putting her in the A tier. And this is primarily because of the fact that she's still really good, but I think people have just gotten better at dealing with her ultimate. So in case you didn't know, the way her ultimate works is that she hits whoever is inside her circle. She will automatically hit the person that was hit the least from her ultimate, if that makes sense. So think of it like this, okay? The less amount of people in the ultimate, the more quickly they will die, because there's less people that have gotten that least amount of hits. But the more people inside the ultimate, the more people she has to jump around and hit individually before she can go back to that first person and hit them again. So with that in mind, it's actually a better idea to actually group up inside her ultimate, because you're less likely to get hit nearly as quickly or at all, and it gives your supports time to actually heal everybody up during the ultimate. Yeah, that's just it. That's just the best way to put it. Outside of her ultimate, she is still a very solid DPS. She still has a very good kit. Her damage is still absolutely insane. She can just like, she still has her one-shot combos, so you just come out of fucking nowhere and just like delete you from the back line. I'm so happy I don't see many Psylocke players, because holy lord is she actually insane to deal with as a support player. I feel like I'm playing Five Nights at Freddy's again. Or not Five Nights at Freddy's, Dead by Daylight. So yeah, very solid character. Her ultimate's just a little bit more manageable to deal with now because the player base has just gotten better. Next up, we have Punisher. I'm putting Punisher in the A tier. I feel like Punisher is just solid overall, like regardless of the map or like team comps. He has his machine gun that he can like spam from afar. His shotgun is actually busted. The fact his shotgun can like 2-tap or 3-tap people is ridiculous. Like the amount of times I thought it was safe, and this dude just comes out of fucking nowhere and just like 1-taps me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what? It happens more often than not. I do feel like his ultimate isn't. I feel like the best way to put his ultimate, I feel like kind of like with Psylocke, people have gotten better at adjusting and dealing with against Punisher's ultimate, because he spends like a few seconds kind of like gearing up before he actually starts firing. It gives enemy teams enough time to like reposition quickly behind cover or something, and like give or even give like support players enough time to just like pop defensive ults to deal with it. Like people have gotten better at dealing with them. That's the best way to put it. But he's still a very solid hero. I would say some of his best maps, kind of like with Moon Knight, are maps that you can just like spam down a choke. Kind of like payload maps where they're very narrow. I would say those are probably some of his best maps, because like he can just sit in a turret and just spam down the choke, and it's actually insane amount of pressure on the receiving end that like sometimes it just feels really hard to like progress. Yeah. Anyways, next up we have Scarlet Witch. I think Scarlet Witch is probably the only character in the game that I would put in the C tier. I feel like some of the changes that she got in the season 1 buffs were actually nerfs, in my opinion. She had like some buffs with some nerfs, so she kind of didn't really like move. But I feel like overall she got a net nerf. So even against like really good Scarlet Witch mains that I've seen here and there, I still feel like she's not really doing a whole lot. She like, I might get distracted like for a moment or two, but like I don't know. I still feel like she just doesn't do enough. It could just be a case that maybe people just don't know what's the safest playstyle with her to like get into the higher ranks. That could be a factor, but for the most part, I just playing against Scarlet Witch, I just feel like I don't have to worry about her majority of the time. So I don't feel like she's bad though, but I definitely don't think she's good. So I think she needs some buffs. Next up we have Spider-Man. I'm putting Spider-Man in the A tier. Believe it or not, I know how should I put it? I think his main selling point for why he's in the A tier and not like the B tier is primarily his movement. Because his movement is so darn quick, he will just come out of fucking nowhere. Like a good Spider-Man player will just, especially if they're teamed up with Venom and they can just like duo dive on top of like the backline, they will just come out of fucking nowhere from like halfway across the map. So you can't even like expect them coming because you literally do not see them. And they dive bomb and like one shot you out of nowhere, and you're just like, I couldn't even respond to that. And like a couple of his like I think his uppercut for like a fraction of a second like locks you out from using your abilities. Maybe that's just me, but that's how it feels like sometimes. So like I just can't. Sometimes against a really good Spider-Man player, I just can't do anything. Sometimes he's still manageable, especially if you're playing like the anti-dive like supports, like Loki, Cloak and Dagger, and then kinda Mantis or Luna, because they have stuns. And then obviously Rocket can just like fly away. But even that, it's just kind of, I don't know. It feels hit or miss against Spider-Man. Either like the supports are good enough where they can kind of like get away and like deal with the Spider-Man. You might not necessarily be able to kill the Spider-Man, but like he's distracting enough where he's not healing your team. And that, in which case he's doing his job. The Spider-Man's doing his job. So I don't know. I feel like he's actually honestly a pretty good hero, but mainly because he'll just come out of nowhere. That's the big thing. Like you can't even like spot him coming, like come around a corner or a cheeky flank or something. He just comes out fucking nowhere. Yeah. And his ultimate's actually pretty solid in my opinion. It's actually not that bad. I'm not against against it getting a buff if it did get a buff. But in its current state, I still think it's a pretty decent ultimate. Obviously not as good compared to others, but it's decent. Next up with Squirrel Girl, I think Squirrel Girl is probably one of the most underrated DPS in the game right now. For this season, she kind of fits in the same boat as like Moon Knight and Punisher, where like she just feels the most oppressive on those narrow chokeholds or choke points, aka payload maps, like Midtown, because like there's not a whole lot of space for enemies to go, so she can just spam down those lanes the entire time. And because she's essentially shooting like mini grenades the entire time, it's just, God, is it oppressive. And like because there's not a whole lot of space to actually get out of the way of her ultimate too, the ultimate just kind of gets free value, and it homes in on people now too. It's actually crazy. I legitimately think Squirrel Girl on certain maps, namely payload maps, is a monster of a pick, and thank God most people don't actually play her or don't pick up on it. She's definitely one of the most underrated heroes in my opinion. Next up we have Star-Lord. Star-Lord, how do I put this? It's tough. I don't actually, you know what? I think I'm going to put Star-Lord in unsure, and it's primarily because I just don't see enough Star-Lord players, which is weird because I know he can definitely be one of the best DPSs in the game, in my personal opinion. I think his potential is there, and I've seen like top 500 like one-trick Star-Lord players play him, and it just, the movement and damage with the aim on these people is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. It's almost like watching a Tracer player from Overwatch. It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. The thing is though, is that majority of players in the game are not at that level, obviously. Like I feel like you probably won't see that level play until maybe you hit like Celestial or Eternity rank. But if you're anything less than that, I don't really see Star-Lords getting the most value out of the hero, as I feel like obviously the ceiling limit is. It's just a very hard to master character, and I feel like because of that reason, because most characters just struggle with playing him, they just don't play him. They just pick other heroes instead. So I just don't see him very often. Yeah, so I'm putting him in an unsure category. Storm, I think Storm's easily one of the best DPS heroes in the game. I played a beast. I like playing Storm even in last season 0. Storm was like my go-to like DPS for quick play, and I love Storm. I still thought she was like pretty decent, but the buffs they gave her this season just easily pushed her over the edge. She just like 2 or 3 shots people now from afar. Her ultimate's really good now. It's a nice AoE. It's one of the few ultimates in the game that can like actually deal with Loki's healing runes, the big healing field on the ground, because it destroys the runes pretty quickly before Loki can like escape. So very solid DPS overall. And she does have a couple team ups, I think, with Thor. I don't remember if she has any other team ups. I think it might be just Thor. But very strong overall. The constant aura and the fact that she flies is honestly the biggest thing about her that like makes her scary. She's almost like an airborne Hela in a way, if that makes sense. Next up we have Bucky. I'm putting Bucky in the A tier. At least in my Grandmaster games, I see a good amount of Buckies now at this point in time, and because like I'm at the rank where people can actually aim. Bucky's scary, man. Bucky's kind of scary, and I don't know if it's just me, but like I feel like a lot of my teammates half the time just don't know how to deal with it, because like maybe they're just not used to dealing with Bucky all the way up until a Grandmaster or something. They just normally didn't have to deal with him, but now like all of a sudden he's kind of there more often than not, and they're good. That like it throws a lot of people off. And the fact that he can just like kidnap people out of nowhere. I've had games where like I'm literally behind a corner, behind my whole team, and then he's not even aiming at me. But like, I'll move like a centimeter to the right, and I just got fucking kidnapped. And like, I watch his point of view, and like, he's not even aiming for me. He was aiming for my front line, and I just somehow got hit by it. Like, it's actually insane. The amount of displacement Bucky has with his pole, and then obviously like the dude has like, if you can land your shots, the dude has crazy damage, like disgusting amounts of damage. It's actually nuts. Nothing broken enough to put him in S tier, but holy shit, against a good Bucky player, like, this guy is scary. And people are just not used to playing against a good Bucky player. I think that's really it. I don't think he's broken. It's just people are just not used to it. I think that's really it. Wolverine, I still think Wolverine is S tier, hands down. Probably the only character in the game that currently gives tank players PTSD. Even support players, like even at like Grandmaster rank, against a good Wolverine, the Wolverine doesn't just go for the supports, or doesn't just go for the tanks. He goes for the supports too. Like, he'll flank and he'll kidnap the supports. He'll just 1v1 the supports, especially if he has his passive up. The dude doesn't die. So I'm just like, and he has good enough damage that he just kills the backline. It's actually scary, and his ultimate is disgusting. Like, the fact that it like locks you out of your character for like a few seconds when he's ulting you is insane. I don't know if you guys knew that, but like, after you land, like after Wolverine lands with his ultimate, like, you can't do anything. Like, you can't move your character, you can't use abilities, nothing. You can't shoot, nothing for like a second while he's just wailing on you the whole time, and he just kills your whole team. It's actually insane. It's not uncommon for at least grouped up like people in the party to ban Wolverine because they just don't want to deal with it. Anyways, next up, Mr. Fantastic. I'm putting him in the unsure category. I just don't see enough Mr. Fantastics to really get an opinion of him. And when I do, I feel like they're kind of just trying him out and experimenting half the time. So I can't really gauge where he is. So yeah, I'm just putting him there. Jeff, I think Jeff is in the B tier, the mediocre. It's primarily for a couple reasons. One, his ultimate just kind of sucks at higher tiers. You don't really get people on the enemy team with it anymore for the most part, especially with like the amount of characters that have mobility or some sort of like defensive ability to like not get eaten by the ult, like Magneto popping his bubble or something, or even just like Punisher just going in his turret form because he doesn't get eaten in turret form. Little things like that. There's enough like abilities in the game to just deny ult from eating people that you can't use the ult defensively, and then there's not really any situations where you can use it defensively either, like to save teammates. It's just overall his ult's just kind of bad. It's very unfortunate. They need to do something about his ult to make his ult more viable, because I feel like it could be a much better hero. It's just his ultimate that's holding it back pretty most part, because he has decent mobility. His heals are actually pretty solid. He's one of the few main healers in the game, in my opinion. There's only like 3 or 4 main healers in the game, like Cloak and Dagger, Jeff, Loki to an extent, and Luna to an extent are the only heroes that can main heal. And just for reference, when I say main heal, I'm not talking about your healing stats. Your healing stats are garbage. Ignore your healing stats. They don't mean shit. The main thing that makes a main healer, in my opinion, is whether or not they can keep an entire team alive during like very high intense situations. So more often than not, this would be like any hero that has some sort of like AoE heals or burst heals are gonna and can do it consistently are the ones that I consider main healers. So like, for example, Jeff has like infinite range on his healing with the water stream. You can heal from like afar, like halfway across the map. It's crazy, and it's like very solid healing numbers too. and his bubbles are AoE heals. When you get the bubbles, they AoE heal like around the person that popped it. So a lot of the times I'll just chuck, like if the enemy team uses their Groot ult on my team, I'll just chuck 4 bubbles into my team because they're all grouped up. So they just get burst healed all the way up to the full, like immediately. It's really good. So Jeff is one of the main healers. Cloak Dagger, for obvious reasons, is a main healer. She just has like all of the AoE heals in the game. Loki is also an AoE healer, as long as you're not playing dive. As long as you're not playing dive or flying characters on your team, he's a main healer. Because his runes make you literally immortal. And then I don't know how many people know this. I don't think a lot of people fully understand Loki, to be honest. But Loki's primary fire is actually an AoE smash effect, so you can actually hit multiple people with his shots. You can heal multiple people at once, and at the same time you can heal both a teammate and damage an enemy at the same time if they're duking it out. If like a teammate and an enemy are in a 1v1 and you shoot like in between them, you can heal your teammate while damaging the enemy at the same time. And plus, if you have like clones in like different positions, you can create off angles where like maybe you can't hit the shot, but if you're shooting in the right direction, your clone can hit the shot and still heal teammates. So Loki can be a main healer. It's just a little bit more situational. Luna's kind of in the same boat, where because she's mostly single target with her heals, her shift is her only form of like multi-heal in the game, not including ultimates, of course, from these heroes. Her shift is to like the only like multi-heal potentially. As long as they're like lined up, that's like the only form of multi-healing she has. So she's kind of main healer-ish too, so also situational. But those are the only like 4 heroes that I consider like main healers, because they have the capabilities to actually like keep an entire team alive quickly, whereas the others don't. Adam Warlock is an exception. I don't consider him a main healer simply because he can only burst heal twice before it goes on cooldown. He has to wait to even heal. That's the only exception. Anyways, yeah, Jeff's main shtick is that his ultimate is just bad for the most part, and I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like against the higher tier players, even though he's kind of slippery and elusive, it still feels difficult to get away sometimes against the really good players, especially since better players at those ranks have better aim. So even when you're on the ground, they can still hit you pretty consistently. So it's a lot harder to get away as Jeff. Anyways, next up, Adam Warlock. I actually think Adam Warlock is probably one of the most underrated supports at the moment. He's one of the only supports in the game that's hit scan. Okay, so him and Luna Snow are pretty much the only supports that are hit scan. He has some of the best damage among supports in the game, period. Even though his ultimate isn't a defensive ultimate like, let's say, Luna Snow or Mantis or Cloak Dagger or Invisible Woman's per se, it's still a defensive ultimate by nature. And I feel like it's pretty solid in like triple support comps, which is a lot of people are playing triple support now, at least at the higher ranks. So like if your team loses a team fight, you just hide as Adam Warlock and then you bring your whole team back immediately. So kind of, and then everyone just heals each other up to full like immediately. Like he's pretty good. I feel like he's one of the few like actually decent counters to the flying characters. So like Iron Man, Storm, sort of kind of Star-Lord, because he kind of flies around too, from the support roster. I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. I think the issue is that most people just don't try playing him. I think that's it. Most people just don't play him, and that's why you don't really see him much. But like the few times I have played against Adam Warlock, the dude just kept getting insane value out of his ultimate. The dude is like killing people. His soul bond is actually very solid against some ultimates and abilities. Very underrated character in my opinion. He's actually the one I'm trying to learn and get better at right now too. Cloak Dagger is easily S tier in my opinion. I would say she's probably one of the the main thing that makes her S tier, in my opinion, is simply because she has consistent AoE heals and burst heals, sort of, with her wall, and sort of kind of her bubble. She has enough AoE heals to like keep a whole team alive just by herself. On top of the fact that she has playmaking ability through her cloak form, being able to discord the black wall, discord enemy team, discord the enemy for that extra damage, and just like just call out like attack this person. This person's discorded. Attack him, like focus fire them while they're blinded by the wall is so good. And then obviously her ultimate just kind of makes your team like immortal as long as they stand in the ultimate for like a decent amount of period of time. And her cloak, the actual cloak ability, can literally save you or teammates from certain abilities or ultimates half the time too. Like, easily one of the best characters. I feel like she's one of the she's like the glue that holds a lot of teams together at the moment, because no one can really do AoE healing nearly as well as she can. Some of the other supports can kind of do what she does, like Loki can kind of do it, Luna Snow can kind of do it, Jeff can kind of do it, but they can't do it as well as she does. She does it the most consistently, which is why she's like S tier. Next up, we have, I'm actually going to do the other S tier supports real quick. I'm going to put Loki in S tier and Luna Snow in S tier, primarily because of the fact that, kind of like I mentioned before, they are main healer capable. Not in every situation. Certain situations they can't really do it as well, but they are capable of it. Loki has very good offensive pressure while also having some of the, I honestly want to say, yeah, probably some of the best burst heals in the game. So like if you have 2 clones up, he can literally provide 120 healing per shot. And if your teammates are grouped up while receiving that healing, that's multiple people receiving 120 healing per shot. It's really good. And then obviously you can place down clones on top of your teammates, like your frontline, for example, or your tanks, and then pop your healing runes to save them. Or just using the save. Like overall, his kit is very fluid and solid. He can help turn fights around very subtly. And the fact that he can just copy whatever the best ultimates in the game are at that point in time, I feel like Loki is going to be like one of the only characters in the game that will just always be one of the best supports, solely because he can always just copy the best characters with his ultimate. That makes sense. On top of, he also has very solid kit. So he's good in the neutral, but also good during the old fights too. Next up, Luna. Luna's S tier. I feel like honestly the main reason I'm putting Luna in S tier is primarily because of her ultimate. Her kit, her neutral kit is still very solid too. The fact that she's hit scan is pretty valuable, helps against like the flyers, and sort of kind of the flankers too, but most of the flyers. She has AoE heals, sort of. She has piercing heals, I should say, when she does her shift ability, the little clap thing that she does. She can kind of burst heal one person with the snowflake above them, so pretty decent. And I think the main thing that sells it for me for her though is the fact that she has a stun with the snowball, which I feel like it just lasts forever, and her ultimate is kind of broken, especially when you combine it with like any of these 2 other supports, Loki or Cloak and Dagger. Your team is like invincible for like around 30 seconds. It's actually insane. Like and it's even more crazy if you have all 3 of them on a team. So pretty, yeah, those are like my S tier supports. Mantis, I actually think Mantis is going to be in the A tier. It's mainly because, like, I think her healing, she has one of the worst healings in the game alongside Rocket, honestly, because it's a very slow heal over time. It's not very reliable. She's mainly there for the offensive pressure and her stun, and then her ultimate's kind of like a mini Luna Snow ultimate. It's not as good though. So let me put it like this: there are ultimates that Luna Snow's ultimate can just straight up deny, but Mantis's ultimate doesn't provide as much healing as Luna's. So there are a few extra ultimates that Luna can deny, but Mantis can't with her ultimate. So it's like, so it's a little weaker, and it doesn't last as long. I think Mantis's only lasts 8 seconds, whereas Luna's lasts 12. So it's shorter in duration too. So it's a little weaker, but it's still strong. The main thing with her though is that she's primarily a DPS support. That's the best way to put it. She's primarily a DPS. Her stun is very solid, and her ultimate's still solid, but not as good compared to like Luna's or Cloak and Daggers, and Loki by proxy. Next up, Rocket. I'm putting Rocket in the B tier. This is primarily... Oh, I forgot to mention that if you like the team up between Star-Lord, Mantis, and Adam Warlock is also really good too. Anyways, Rocket. I'm putting Rocket in the B tier. He's still a decent, at least at the higher ranks. Rocket's main strength is that he just doesn't die. That's it. And because he doesn't die, he can provide constant healing, but his healing is very low. It's a very low heal over time. So it's like you're not going to be able to save anybody, and during like ultimate, whenever large team fights break out, and like maybe 1 or 2 ultimates get used, or maybe like the enemy DPS get like a big chunk of damage off your team all of a sudden, like maybe they had a Moon Knight or something, and the Moon Knight landed a really good onk. Rocket's not gonna be able to save your team from that. That's it. He's just there to provide like constant healing, but whenever a big moment like that happens, he can't do anything about it. And like that's honestly that's kind of it. He's just really good at surviving. So like if the enemy team's playing dive and your team's not doing anything to like help you against the dive, I don't blame you for going Rocket, because at least you can survive and still kind of do your job. But now you don't have his ultimate's honestly worthless. Every time I've seen his ultimate get used both on my team and against me, I literally ignore it. It literally feels like it doesn't make any difference at all whatsoever. His ultimate's literally useless. So you don't have a defensive ultimate, or not even defensive ultimate. It feels like you don't even have an ultimate with Rocket. And his healing is kind of terrible, to be honest. Because realistically, the main thing that matters about healing in this game isn't whether or not you're doing healing or you can get large healing numbers. It's whether or not you can keep your team alive during moments where it matters. That's the difference. And that's the thing I think most people don't understand about Rocket, or just healing in general in this game. And damage, I would also put damage in the same category, where like how much damage you do doesn't matter until when it matters. Okay, it doesn't matter if you have 40,000 damage or whatever, but like if you can't kill anybody with that 40,000 damage, if you're just tickling them the whole time, maybe like with Star-Lord or something, then it doesn't matter. Elims killing people or saving your teammates from being killed are what matter. So if you can't secure the kill, you're almost kind of doing nothing. You're not gonna be able to win team fights that way. So yeah, I can't put enough pressure. So anyways, next up we have last but not least, Invisible Woman. I'm also gonna put Invisible Woman in the A tier. She's kind of in the same boat as Mantis, where I don't know, she's a little different. She has really good displacement. That's the best way to put it. She has really good displacement abilities. Her push and pull is very solid. You can get some environmental kills with it. She's a very solid counter to certain heroes in the game, like Wolverine. Being able to completely disrupt Wolverine's like dash abilities, whether it's the grab or the actual like dash, very good. Sometimes, because like I mentioned before, Doctor Strange, well, especially at least at the higher tiers, they like to do like that bunny hop type thing and to ult into the backline. Invisible Woman can literally just push him out of the way, so they just kind of fuck that up. Yeah, she can help help peel for teammates when they get dove by either like Spider-Man, Iron Fist, etc. Overall, yeah, very, very good displacement. Her little gravity orb thing is actually a somewhat decent counter. It's like a soft counter against flyers too. Because you didn't know, if you toss the gravity orb at Iron Man or Storm, they stop flying. They literally just drop from the sky until they're no longer within the orb's range. So you can help like displace flyers for a moment. With that, pretty solid. And then obviously she has one of the best ultimates in the game. It's a defensive ultimate. I think honestly the main thing that's keeping her in the A tier and not the S tier for me is just simply her healing. Her healing can be very iffy. Her shield is actually pretty decent at being able to keep teammates alive that are very mobile or flyers. So think like Spider-Man, Storm, Iron Man, maybe some flankers that are within range, like maybe Psylocke or something. She can help keep them alive by just putting a shield in her face. So that's pretty decent. It's not very quick though. It only has 300 HP, so it can break very quickly. Her primary fire is decent. That's the best way to put it. It's decent because it pierces it and it does it twice. It can actually provide very decent healing on whoever she's focusing on whatever teammate she's focusing on. Or if you're playing on like payload maps or like very narrow maps where your team is just naturally lined up, you can actually heal multiple of your teammates at once. That's very strong. But it's like whenever you're not in this situation, so think like control maps where everyone's very spread out, it's very wide open, out in the open, everyone's just kind of off in different spots doing their own thing. It can be a little bit more difficult in those situations. Overall solid hero though. I definitely do not think she's worthy of being in the B tier, but I don't think she's S tier at all either. Just a very solid hero in general. That's the best way to put it. But anyways, that's it for my tier list, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are about it in the comment section down below. If there's something that you would like to include, maybe to like help me understand some of these characters a little better, because obviously I don't play every hero in the game, by all means let me know. I would love to hear about it. On top of too, like I have a Marvel Rivals Discord that I created, so if you're interested in joining that, I'll put it in the description. But other than that, my name is Brian, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.